Hello, my name is Christopher Johnston. I am going to be reading from my new book that came out in May of 2018 called Shattering Silences, and the subtitle is Strategies to Prevent Sexual Assault, Heal Survivors, and Bring Assailants to Justice. The first section I'm going to read is from the introduction that tells a little bit about how I got involved in this topic in the first place. I am a freelance journalist and I write about a lot of topics, but the introduction will let you know how I ended up getting involved in a very complex subject and spent about 8.5 years working on what became the book. I first learned of these significant changes and improvements when, in November of 2009, I got involved in the case of serial rapist and murderer Anthony Sowell, who had been arrested in Cleveland on Halloween after murdering 11 women and burying them in his backyard and house. A good friend and fellow journalist, Robert Sperna, asked if I would be interested in co-authoring a book about the case. I wasn't sure. Mainly, I wanted to see whether my hometown swept it under the rug or stepped up and said no more. So I did some preliminary interviews with people in Sowell's neighborhood, police, urban affairs professors, and so on, and then later covered the trial with Robert. He writes a lot more about the crime beat than I do, so he went on to pen the definitive study of the case, House of Horrors, the shocking true story of Anthony Sowell, the Cleveland Strangler, which was published by Kent State University Press in 2012. Along the way, though, I began to meet people who were responding to this terrifying, soulless criminal by improving the way sexual violence victims and cases were handled in Cleveland. They were the solution providers to this ancient problem of cruel victim blaming, ignoring, and disregarding rape and sexual assault victims, and allowing many of the predators committing their crimes to roam freely. Professionals such as Elizabeth Booth, RN, a sexual assault nurse examiner at the Metro Health System, or Megan O'Brien at the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, or then Lieutenant Jim McPike, supervisor of the Cleveland Police Department's Sex Crimes and Child Abuse Unit, became my initial guides into this world. Ever since then, they and many others I have met along the way, anyone included in this book, have continued to help me understand the challenges these organizations were facing, the tribulations of survivors trying to recover, and the radical new approaches and initiatives that were starting to be implemented not just in Cleveland, but also in Detroit, Houston, Memphis, and now many other cities. In 2016, I wrote a cover story for the Christian Science Monitor on what Cleveland had learned in responding to the Cleveland Strangler, and how that had blossomed into a set of innovative and effective approaches. Just as important, the key players had all come out of their silos to work together on this insidious phenomenon, and their camaraderie was apparent at press conferences or meetings and in the friendly way they related to each other as colleagues. Because I knew it was happening elsewhere, and that Cleveland, Detroit, and Memphis had partnered their sexual assault kit task forces, I felt there was a need for a compelling book that would explore the successes and challenges of this movement, as well as the professionals who were committed to doing the right thing and spreading the good word. The history of how SANE-A originated is an interesting case with some roots in 2009. SANE-A is the sexual assault kit initiative started by Joe Biden in 2015. 2 years prior, the National Institute of Justice, the research, development, and evaluation agency of the U.S. Department of Justice, funded a study by Research Triangle Institute of why law enforcement agencies did not take serious sexual assault cases seriously or send evidence forward to initiate prosecution of offenders. The study found that often they didn't understand the complex dynamics around sexual assault cases, nor did they understand the victims. Law enforcement thought they were lying or partially to blame for the assault. Some didn't fully understand the value of DNA evidence yet or believed it would cost too much to test the evidence in sexual assault kits. That set the stage for a distinctive federal response in 2009 when Human Rights Watch published its report on the backlog of 12,669 untested sexual assault kits found in Los Angeles that were the property of the Los Angeles Police and Sheriff's Department, which shared a criminal evidence laboratory. The report quoted Marta Mayakawa, a detective for the Los Angeles Police Department Cold Case Robbery and Homicide Division. If people in Los Angeles hear about this rape kit backlog and it makes them not want to work with the police in reporting their rape, then this backlog of ours would be tragic. The report triggered an avalanche of public, private, and journalistic responses. According to a source I spoke to who was working there at the time but who had asked not to be named, NIJ reached out to the LAPD and Sheriff's Department and the crime lab directors they had existing relationships with to offer any help or guide them to any resources they might need to resolve the untested kits issue. The law enforcement departments were both open to disclosing what the situation was, and NIJ used it as an opportunity to research the problem in what they call a quote-unquote natural experiment, where something is already happening so they take advantage and study it. LA allowed NIJ to perform random sampling on 370 backlog kits to see what evidence they could reap from the testing. Subsequently, NIJ published the Sexual Assault Kit Backlog Study in June 2012. Concurrently, other jurisdictions started reporting enormous collections of untested kits in their property storage, and everyone began to realize it was a more widespread problem than initially thought. In 2011, NIJ decided to solicit one of their action research projects to get to the root of why jurisdictions were experiencing these massive numbers of untested kits. Detroit and Houston were selected as the test sites. The objective was to have researchers and practitioners in those jurisdictions work together to understand and solve the problem. If they couldn't solve the problem with their current methods, they could make mid-course corrections, providing an evolutionary type of research project to uncover solutions and generate protocols for other jurisdictions to follow. Both cities developed safe, effective means of handling victim notification. Houston devised what they called a quote-unquote whole-time justice advocate, embedding advocates in their police department to work directly with victims and investigators. Both cities began to deploy funds to hire victim advocates, investigators, and prosecutors specifically to address the backlogged rape kits. NIJ credits that project with creating the groundswell of best practices and protocols, many of which other cities, counties, states, and jurisdictions continue to implement. Additionally, according to my source, the former NIJ staff member, the number one lesson learned was the importance of having a multidisciplinary approach to take on the untested kits and resulting criminal cases. This next excerpt is from Chapter 3, The Healers, Elizabeth Booth, RN, SANE-A, and Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners. SANE-A just means that she can work with adolescents as well as adults. And Liz Booth was incredibly helpful to me in this book, and so this is a chapter about her. She was a great guide and teacher for me throughout the whole process. Liz Booth grew up about an hour south of Cleveland in Rittman, Ohio, before her family moved east and north to Madison. By the time she got to high school, she aspired to be a veterinarian. She enrolled in Lakeland Community College, just east of Cleveland. When she learned how expensive vet school was and how little she'd earn as a vet, she followed in the footsteps of her father Dale and joined the U.S. Air Force in September of 1997 to let them pay for it. She asked to become either an air traffic controller or an EMT. Eyeing her previous experience working in a vet's office and as a home health aide, the Air Force sent her to EMT school. That's when I fell in love with medicine, and specifically nursing, Booth recalls. Honorably discharged as a senior airman in 2001, she returned full-time to Lakeland Community College's nursing school. To help her pay her way, Booth worked as a medical assistant in Akron Children's Hospital. Her mentor there, Natalie Jadasek, a doctor, told her Metro Health Medical Center, where Dr. Jadasek's mother worked, was looking for clinical assistants and would be lucky to have her. She also told her that she should avoid the step-down or medical floor positions because her skills would be better served in a more difficult environment. Encouraged, the soft-spoken young nurse applied. There were also positions available in the neonatal intensive care unit or emergency department. A self-confessed adrenaline junkie from her Air Force days, Booth chose the ED. Shortly after she was hired, Booth began to notice a stark deficiency in the way rape and sexual assault victims were treated in Metro's ED. Because it is Cleveland's only Level 1 trauma center, emergency triage was handled one way, she says, life-threatening first, then everything else. Unless a rape victim had sustained injuries requiring emergency care, they had to be, well, patient. One rape victim haunts her to this day. What happened that afternoon crystallized Booth's indefatigable motivation to do everything she has done since. Petite, late 20s, clad in jeans and a sweatshirt, the girl sat alone, crying, nose running, with a hollow look on her face as she twirled the long blonde hair coursing down her back. Slumped forward in a chair, knees bouncing nervously, she waited in Metro's perpetually frenetic emergency room. Booth watched from behind the nurse's station as the young woman returned, asking to be examined again and again. Each time, the charge nurse explained that she would have to wait. More severely injured patients were ahead of her. Growing increasingly agitated, the young woman began pacing the hallway, cursing under her breath. Finally, after 5 or 6 hours of stomping and fuming, she screamed, "Give me a break!" and stormed out of the ER. That was in 2008, and it wasn't the last time Booth would become upset by the look of hopelessness in the eyes of a rape victim forced to endure the humiliating experience of feeling as if no one cared. Booth still shudders at how victims who chose to wait were treated. Since none of the hospital staff were trained in how to provide a thorough medical and forensic rape examination, someone would crack open a manual and read the directions for the procedure. There was no other area of medicine where that would be acceptable, she says. It just got me, so I thought, all right, I'll do the training myself and see where it goes. Under her guidance, Metro signed a memorandum of understanding with Cuyahoga County to become a certified SANE program in 2010. She has trained more than 30 other nurses at Metro to become certified SANEs who can all be on call. Metro is now a national training center for this growing specialty area of forensic nursing. 10 years ago, approximately 200 such examination programs existed throughout the U.S., and now there are more than 772. Currently, the International Association of Forensic Nurses counts more than 3,700 members who are SANEs and other types of forensic nurses. In 2000, there were 1,966. We do see it as a growing field, says Sally Lasky, then CEO of the International Association of Forensic Nurses in Elk Ridge, Maryland. We see that the need is ever increasing. The shortage of qualified nurses is a challenge, but we see communities looking at ways that they can provide those services, and with the support of hospital administrators and other community-based programs, we will see an increase. The dialogue that is happening at the national level in the U.S. has put more attention on forensic nursing programs, and specifically around sexual assault nurse examiner programs. The Violence Against Women Act of 1994 has provided funding for some of those programs, so we have seen an increase as there's been more dialogue and federal legislation supporting same practice as a response to violence, she continued. A recent IAFN poll revealed that some states have only one certified program, whereas Ohio has the most, with 80. We are fortunate in Northeast Ohio to have 4 hospitals with established programs, but a lot of our rural areas still don't have any easy access, Booth says. The issue of access is critical, Lasky commented. We're working on ways to assist communities and building access to care in the way that makes the most sense for that community. Making sure no one is ever turned away from services is a key issue for us. While more SANEs are needed, as well as an increased awareness that even exists to help patients, a deep cultural change has already taken hold. Booth and her SANE nurses interact with the police almost daily. Forced to hold one of our first meetings in the hospital cafe because our office is stacked floor to ceiling with boxes of new clothes and toiletries donated for victims through a recent campaign, Booth tells me the most important change she has seen. If the frontline person didn't believe the survivor of a sexual assault, the patient would just take off before we could do our exam. Now that they're being believed and treated well, they stay and complete the entire extensive and exhausting examination. Cooperative patients are more inclined to participate in the prosecution and testify in court, something Booth and her nurses do regularly themselves. Also, the victim's healing process is improved since they are more willing to seek counsel and discuss the assault with family members and friends who can support them. Chapter 11, The Scientist-Researcher, Rebecca Cambell's Psychological Paradigm Shift. Rebecca Cambell is a researcher that I spent a lot of time with out of the Michigan State University, and she was also one of my key teachers and mentors, and she's really made a tremendous amount of impact on this whole profession with her training in the neurobiology of trauma. So this is the first part of Chapter 11. Lying on a bed waiting, uncomfortable and disoriented, the woman in her early 20s had been raped. She soon realized several physicians were quarreling in the hallway outside of her examination room. "I don't want to do this, Kit," she heard one doctor say. "I don't want to do this, Kit," said the other. "You're the lowest-ranking resident. You can do it." A woman of similar age, Rebecca Cambell, stood nearby, appalled, watching yet another such argument occur in a hallway of the facility where she volunteered as a rape crisis victim advocate. Located in Urbana, Illinois, a women's fund offered a combined domestic violence and sexual assault program. Cambell was working on her bachelor's degree in psychology at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She was there doing a women's studies practicum at the beginning of a decade of her initial research into how awful the community response, police, nurses, doctors, and other first responders, was to rape. Mostly, she felt this place was where she belonged. Her work was what she had chosen for her career. Still, it was nearing the tail end of the dark ages of rape and sexual assault 25 years ago, before there were sexual assault nurse examiners who were experts in treating victims of sexual assault and who knew how to perform the rape kit examination thoroughly, all while treating the victim with dignity and compassion. She knew the resident had no idea how to do the examination. Heck, he barely knew how to do a gynecological examination, which is not the same as a sexual assault kit exam anyway. The latter is intended to detect and treat any injuries to the victim's genital area and collect forensic evidence of sexual assault. Striding into the room where the young woman lay, the resident proceeded to open the kit, remove and unfold the instruction sheet, and set it down to refer to during the exam, on the abdomen of the victim, as if she were a book prop. Looking on and now completely horrified, Cambell picked up the sheet and handed it back to him. "No, you can't do this," she declared. "You can't do this." Today she chuckles at the resident's indignant response and angry look of, "Who do you think you are?" I felt then, and I do now, that I did have the expertise, even as a very, very young student of psychology, to say that behavior was not consistent with how you treat a human being, declares the born and bred Midwesterner from Champaign, Illinois. It just wasn't. When it was all over, the victim, hurt, confused, and just trying to get through this most recent humiliation, later, very, very sweetly, thanked her advocate. That was a pivotal moment for me, very early in my career, Cambell says, as we sit at a small conference table in her long rectangular office in the psychology building at Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan, where she joined the faculty in 2003 as a professor of psychology. It was during that formative time when I knew I was committed to psychology, she continues. I was committed to doing research on trauma, but that was the crystallizing moment. This is exactly what I want to do. We have to make this better. A self-confessed neatnik, as much as possible she keeps her office surfaces clear and organized to enhance her mental organization, and as a reminder, there's a way through the volumes of complex information she needs to digest to generate her research papers and articles. I can find a narrative in this I can make sense out of this incredibly messy data spreadsheet, she reasons. There's a pattern here, I just need to find it. Her desk is near a window overlooking the campus to the west. Running the length of her office stands a wall of bookshelves packed with titles pertaining to statistical methods and designs or sexual violence, including Missoula, sexual violence, violence against women. It's math and then violence, so there's nothing happy on this wall, she says. At the far end of her office, there's a row of file cabinets, because I'm still an old dinosaur who puts things on paper. Serving as a trophy stand for her numerous teaching and research awards, including one from Eric Holder, the 82nd U.S. Attorney General, the Department of Justice's Vision 21 Crime Victims Research Award. Around the door is what everyone refers to as her quote-unquote wall of children, which features years of progressively changing artwork provided by her son, now 15, and daughter, now 12. I like to have all of these pictures that my kids have drawn over the years as a reminder that I do this to make the world safer for them, she says. Our meeting is in April 2017, and earlier this week she attended an ill-fated final gathering of the National Commission on Forensic Science in Washington, D.C. Prior to the meeting that morning, they learned that their commission, dedicated to the fair and proper use of forensic science in the criminal justice system, had not been renewed by the U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Cambell was there to present about DNA and CODIS hits and explain that the victim's point of view and how the victim notification works when an offender is discovered after an untested kit has been processed. What do we learn from research? What do we know about the best ways to communicate very complex DNA information to survivors when they're very likely in a state of trauma because they were just recontacted about a rape that happened many moons ago, she explains. The participants were all fascinated, yet the pall of an expected funeral settled over the collection of the best minds in forensic science, prosecution, defense attorneys, and law enforcement in the U.S. at the Office of Justice Programs. They've been at it for years, Cambell concludes. Now they won't be. Her son happened to see an article about the closing of the NCFS in the Washington Post and asked her about it when she got home. Now I can talk to them about it and hopefully raise them to be socially concerned, socially adjusted, she says. But that's what I do when I'm not doing this. I just go with my family, drive children to soccer, drive children to swim meets, watch Food Network TV. Over the years, due to confidentiality and parental sensitivity issues, she developed a handful of euphemisms for her topics of study when they asked, "How was your day, Mommy?" As her kids get older, she can gradually be a little more detailed about her work. I'm going to read the opening of Chapter 12, The Investigator, Mark Farrah and the Wayne County SAC Task Force. Just to the left of his computer monitor, Mark Farrah, investigator for the Wayne County SAKTF, which is the Sexual Assault Kit Task Force, keeps a list of names, phone numbers, and email addresses of victims from the Detroit Rape Kit backlog whose cases have been adjudicated. On the rare occasion when there's a little bit of downtime, and we try to make this a general practice for everybody, just look over and dial up a number, he says. It may be 6 months or 9 months later. Hey, haven't talked to you in a while, just wanted to touch base. How are you doing? That call just goes so far. We like to let them know that they weren't just a number to us, a statistic to say we wrapped up another one. We really become somewhat attached to them. And Mark's just a really nice guy. He's a grizzled veteran police officer detective, but he's just a really pleasant, personable man. Occasionally, should a victim get into a minor legal scrape, detectives have accompanied them to court for support. Farrah's office maintains a jeans fund so that the normally suit-clad investigators can dress casually on Fridays and throw a few bucks into a coffee can. The funds are used to help victims if, for example, they need to drive downtown and end up getting a parking ticket, or if they just need a cup of coffee and a donut or lunch. On the 11th floor of their building, the female detectives and prosecutors stock a closet of women's clothing, since the majority of the victims are women, in case they can't afford the proper attire for a court proceeding. We try to go the extra mile to make it as simple as possible and let them know that we're doing everything we can for them, Mark explains. Another approach that Farrah believes distinguishes their work is what's known as vertical prosecution. In other words, the investigator, prosecutor, and advocate stay with the case from its inception through prosecution. They do not hand off cases to others. This continuity is something the affable Farrah says he's never seen done before in his previous law enforcement life. Sometimes there would be 3 or 4 different investigators involved in a case. The dedicated group approach helped the victims feel more comfortable as they proceed through the justice system. It's especially effective since the team members all become involved in the victims' lives. They know how their children are doing, when their birthdays are, and when one of the kids is in the school Christmas play. That really means a lot to them, so that's one of the unique aspects of the way that we do it here, Farrah says. We do have an impact on their lives. We can't take them out of the neighborhoods, we can't provide them with a safe haven, but they have a name and a number of somebody if they feel they can need help from someone they trust. That empathy for victims is a key characteristic that distinguishes Farrah and the other Wayne County investigators. It's at the core of the victim-centered, trauma-informed approach they implement when working with victims, starting with their victim notification procedures as they initiated an investigation of one of the backlog kits. Within the SACTF world, Farrah is considered an expert in notifications now. He's been doing them since he joined the task force in 2014 after 25 years on the police department in the Detroit suburb of Southgate. As the 2016 Detroit Summit of Cities, he served on a panel specifically to address the notification techniques. The panel discussed some of the varying approaches to victim notification. Unlike Cuyahoga County's task force, for example, Wayne County investigators never bring victim advocates with them as a safety measure, although their absence can add to the burden of what they're doing. He says they always look at Google Maps to get an idea of where they're going through a neighborhood because it may have changed since the photos were taken. If the victim wants to move forward with the case, investigators then introduce an advocate at a second meeting, most often at Wayne County SAFE, Wayne County's Rape Crisis and Victim Advocacy Center. They also do all notifications in person, whereas some task forces contact victims by telephone first. Those units prefer phone notification in case the person has moved on from their assault, which may have happened 15 or 20 years ago, so the victim may not have told family members about what happened to them. Preferring in-person notification, Farrah explains that task force members always prepare for situations where the victim is not alone and someone else at the home does not know or may be a danger to them in domestic violence situations, for example. They always create an alibi to give the victim if they need it. When I take that girl out onto the porch and we talk a little bit, we always give them a story. Generally, through our initial investigation, we'll know some things about them. We'll say, tell them when you worked at Burger King 7 years ago, it got robbed, and they just arrested the guy that robbed a whole bunch of Burger Kings, and we're trying to tie him into some of these other cases. We'll give them something to go back into the house with so they're not getting questions by their family as to why the police are there. You have to take every precaution. The safety of our victim is our ultimate concern.